This is a time where we get together with friends to talk about spirited issues, or at least topics under a spirited light, in an unscripted and unplugged way. We have a wonderful opportunity to chat here today. We are calling this one, How Did I End Up in This Family? And we thought that since all of us, or at least many of us, are stuck in our homes with our families, causing what some have lovingly dubbed a pressure cooker. From a familial perspective, we figure we might spend some time talking about family from a spiritual perspective, and how did we end up here in our families? And we have a very esteemed set of guests today. Some of us are here frequently, and one of us is not. And we want to make sure that we have enough time to get to know everybody. So let's do round. Here we go. Hey, Susanna, can you say hello to us?
Hello, everybody. I am Susanna Simões, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today. I am speaking to you from my home, stuck with my family in Miami.
Thank you, Susanna.
And I'm Flavio. As you all know, I'm from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, here with my beautiful family. It's a little colder than Miami, I'm sure. We're having a great time with the family here. Happy to be with you guys. Looking forward to another conversations.
And you know me, I'm Dan. I'm all the way across the country in California. I am the ugly duckling here. Everybody's on Eastern time. I'm on Pacific time. But enough about me. We also have a very special guest today. You probably know her already, but let's introduce her anyways. Andrea, can you say hi to us?
Hey, you guys. This is Andrea. Some of you know me. Some of you do not know me. I'm in Miami Beach, pretty close to Susanna, and actually distant from Flavio and Daniel, but not spiritually distant, because we are connected now, and I'm very grateful.
Ooh, I like it.
That was super nice, super nice.
Yeah,
number one.
And you know, we all we the topic of today, as we talked about, is how did I end up in this family? And one of the jokes that obviously came to mind is, how did Andrea end up in this family, this functional family of ours here, right? But I think that she will be, she'll have tough skin to kind of deal with us. But that's how the conversation starts. Family. We are all with our families. We are thinking about lots of things in this time of COVID. But family, are there things that we should think about when it comes to family? What's family for? Where do you guys want to start?
What is a family, first of all? What constitutes a family? It's a more important question, right?
Yeah, that was interesting because just the way you open it, right? Said, how did Andrea end up here in this family? So
that's right.
So we are talking about something that in Spiritism we call the spiritual family. So that's a concept. So the concept is that we have spiritual families, spirits who we have lived before in the past, who we have built relationships, who we have affinity. And so these comprise our, let's put it this way, our true spiritual family, right? So that's one idea of family. And then we have our families in the present moment. This group of people that come together biologically or not, but they are willing to share their lives, to grow together, and to stuck together to one another for the necessary learnings that life offers in this context.
And I think that the question actually is a question that every teenager in the face of the earth has made sometime or another. I mean, I remember I had that same question a lot. You know, how did I end up in this family? I mean, maybe God got the address incorrect. Maybe I shouldn't be here. You know, when we have some of the challenges that rise up, and also some of the things that we see that when we are not mature enough yet to understand or perceive, we feel that we've been placed incorrectly in the wrong family. And then again, thankfully for Spiritism, we see exactly what Susanna mentioned, because we find along the way those that we consider to be in our spiritual family, those that we had already developed a very special kinship where we feel that we've been with each other for a very long time in a good way.
That's great, people. But hold on a second. Hold on a second here. Right?
Too much too fast.
You guys are just like way too smart for me here. I think that Flavio's point is a great one, right? So we all think of our families as our physical families. And I love that you guys took it all the way to college, right? But level down to kindergarten here for me, right? So we have our physical families, which is our natural concept of families. And even then, we also even have differences, right, of opinion on what our families is. Is it our immediate family? Is it just our fathers, mothers, brothers, and siblings?
Exactly.
Is it our extended family? Does it include our in-laws? Does it include our grandmas, right? So I love that you guys have already brought in the big guns and help us detach ourselves from the idea that family goes beyond the physical ties, right, of family ties, which is it's kind of like invoking the JC. It's like bringing Jesus Christ straight into this. Remember that part in Matthew when he says, like, who's my mother and who's my brother, right? So when the mother and brother come to collect him because they're a little worried that he's talking in public and, rousing up a rebellion there, and he turns around and says, who's my mother, who's my brother? Whoever is it with me is my brothers and my mother. So expanding this concept that you guys did to the Spirit is brilliant, right? And that's a really big difference from what we are used to, right? Because I don't know about you, but I know that when I wake up, I don't wake up and look at my family and say, oh, you guys are all from a spiritual perspective united. How great, right? That's not exactly what goes through my mind. Is that where you're going, Flavio? Is that where your initial point was?
Absolutely. You're not in lockstep there. So my again, the idea of my first question was, sometimes we look at our families and we ask ourselves, what the hell am I doing here? Do I belong here, right? Other times we see the same families, I'm so glad that I'm in this family, right? So when we look at this, am I right or am I wrong to think, in this dichotomy all the time? That's one part of what I was thinking too, right?
Great. And before you go on, Flavio, I want to bring a comment from our friend Kirsten here asking if that was Pickles barking in the background.
Yes, possibly. Let me just clarify. It's Pickles is a dog, and it's part of my family. So something else to think about, right? Our animals in our family. So I apologize for that. His bark is very loud.
Hey, Pickles is part of the family. But sorry, Flavio, I just wanted to make that point that our family always goes beyond the humans sometimes, right?
Absolutely, that's a great point. And plus, I wanted to tie that or stitch that back to the quote unquote, old ways of seeing family as that couple with 2 kids and a white picket fence, right? Is that the concept of family that we understand? So if you look at this, right, we all come from different backgrounds, different types of families. I'd love for us to spend some time and to really show folks that are, listening or looking at or seeing us, right, or watching us live, right, that family can come in any type, in all types, in all sizes, in all colors, all sorts of diversity, right? That we understand that happens for a reason. So can we make stitch towards the direction, if that's okay?
Yeah, we have to, right? Because when we begin to go back to, when we go back to what our super smart people here were saying from the beginning, from a spiritual perspective, we understand that physical ties are not as important as spiritual ties sometimes, because we all have people sometimes that we are very close to that might not be related by blood. I think we all have had this experience where we meet a friend or somebody comes into our lives and we instantly hit this connection and have this connection that might be even stronger than many of our siblings, right? It's an interesting phenomena that takes place sometimes, and that only the law of affinity and reincarnation may explain a little bit. So it's a great point that you bring up, Flavio.
So
quiet. Everybody's quiet now.
Yeah, well, we're all polite here today.
All very polite at the beginning.
I would like, Flavio. So I would like to recommend for whoever's listening to us and really interested in understanding the family concept in Spiritism, the book Family Constellation by the Spirit Joana de Angelis through the mediumship of Divaldo Franco is, in my opinion, one of the most outstanding books that explores the concept of family from many different angles. And at the very end of the book, I think it's the last chapter, she has a concept that she says, the family is any group of people who comes together and to learn to love. And how do you evaluate if a family constellation is being successful is to see, when you look at that family constellation, how much love is present, right? So it doesn't have to do with the physical cultural structure per se, but anytime a group of people come together and they are willing to learn to love one another and to undergo this journey, because it is a journey, right? It is perhaps the most sacred, and I say this in all seriousness now, because I think that much of what we see in our society today, in terms of disharmony and disorganization and issues, come from the fact that we have not been given the families its importance. We haven't, as a society, recognized the importance of these institution that we call family. And I think that we need to take a close look at it, because it has a huge impact. Family formation, the value we give to families, in how we are faring as a society. So I think that that's something that it would be nice to explore and talk a little bit about.
Yeah.
Susanna, this reminds me to the phrase that comes from Mother Teresa, that she says, fix the family and all the world problems will go away, right? So that means if we fix our families, right, or if everybody fixed their own families, we won't have any more world problems, right? So
indeed,
the concept about fixing one family, I really, really love this topic, because we have come to learn of family as a concept of a cell, right? Every society has a bunch of cells that are made up of family homes, and it goes, in accordance with what Susanna was talking about, the importance really of investing in trying to understand the formation of it and how we can make it a healthy one by understanding who we are first and foremost, because we can only fix the family if we are fixing ourselves, if we are working on ourselves, if we are working through everything, the virtues, the frailties, the vices, we utilizing the virtues that we have already acquired, especially us that have had contact with Spiritism, with all of the material that comes to give us an idea that it is up to us to work towards the development of a healthy cell called family, so that our society doesn't hurt. And it does start with us, with the work, the inner work that we are all responsible for doing within ourselves.
Yeah. I would say that the way I like thinking about it, I like thinking about family as the laboratory of society, right? It's the lab of relationships, because everything that we learn in family is what we practice out in the world. And it's a lot safer for us to start off with a smaller group of people and learn things, and then to apply to a larger group of people. So absolutely, the relationships that we have within our smaller circle will dictate our relationships with the larger social circles and all the different circles of families that we have. So getting family right, understanding that is really important, not only for ourselves and obviously for those in our family, but for society as a whole, for the world, like you guys are saying, right? And I think yeah, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, very, very often in the Spiritist Center, regardless of what we are talking about, people say, how are we going to fix the world, right? How are we going to fix these problems? Yep. And I think that the answer is very much about, this topic. So Emmanuel, he talks a lot about families and the spirit Emmanuel. And he talks about like how schools, the instructors, but the family is really the place where the soul is educated. And I like the idea to think that God is so incredibly wise. It's so difficult for us to relate that he put us in these very small groups and say, okay, here you are, 3, 4, 5 people. See if you can figure out among 3, 4, 5 people, because that's the beginning, right? So if you can sacrifice for your child, if you can sacrifice for your parent, which feels to us sacrifice, right? Then that's the idea. That's what you need to take. You need to see every single human being exactly to that same level and practice within this small nuclei, exactly what you would like to see reflected out there in the world.
Yeah.
We're struggling, right?
Yes.
We're struggling.
Yes, we are.
We're having a difficult time.
I wanted to mention here, I know Susanna mentioned the book, Family Constellation, but I also wanted to point out another book that is really great that talks about how, the whole structure of family planning really comes about with a lot of investments and a lot of planning in the book Missionaries of the Light, where specifically they talk about the family that eventually will become a family of 4. At the moment, it was a family of 3, and we're talking about, everybody knows the case of Segismundo and Raquel and Adeline. And if you don't know,
everybody knows.
I know. If you
not
don't
everybody
know,
knows.
Right. Okay.
Well,
Those that are connected right now that I can see do know. But if you're listening after, sorry, you guys. If you're listening after, get the book, because they do talk about the whole aspect, not about the reincarnatory plan per se, how it takes place, how the spirit dives into flesh. It's not about that I'm talking about. I'm talking about how these beings, the souls, come together prior to reincarnating, developing a plan for success. It is never a plan for failure. It's for success, to be able to work out their differences. And it is also a place of healing. So I saw a question from Kirsten where she asked about how one can combat the loneliness that comes when we don't feel the affinity with our blood relatives. And there is a lot that we can, this could be one spiritist conversation in itself to talk about that. But when I personally read about the whole planning that goes behind it, and of course I did have, trials and challenges in my family growing up who didn't, it opened up a whole view that, God does place beside us others that we have a kinship with, that will assist us during the hard days. And when we also realize that we are also not perfect, and that we also have things that we need to work out, and that there are also things that, eventually they're also having to deal with. So of course, we have psychology to help us. Andre Moreira, by the way, is listening. We have psychology to help out. And Spiritism also opens up a whole veil of information for us to be able to facilitate understanding what is my role. It's not only how did I end up in this family, but what is my role, healing role, that is in this family.
Yep. And let's unpack that a little bit, right? Because I think that we all agree that family is an really important piece, not only for ourselves and for society. And I think that we are saying that it's also a really great learning opportunity, right? In general. And that we sometimes fail to see that from our physical perspective. But when we look at our spiritual perspective, like you were saying, Andrea, and all the work that goes into it, we start to get a better sense of why we are in a family that we are, right? And that might be a wonderful exercise for us to play out, right? And think, not from our perspective and say, who's beside me? But imagine if we were on the other side, preparing to reincarnate, as we see sometimes in those books like by Andrea Luiz, right? And we say, how would you choose the family that is going to live that one family, that one lifetime with you? Right? How would you go about choosing that? Would you choose everybody that just loved you? Or would you choose people that could teach you things? Or that perhaps you had to straighten things out with? Because family is also a great time to do that, right? From an engineering perspective, from a spiritual engineering perspective, if you also have not had a good track record with one particular individual or so over a couple of lifetimes, it might make sense to put both of them together to kind of say, hey, you guys are going to spend some time together. You're going to have some extra love there. Figure this out, right? Figure this out, because you can't keep going that way. So it's an interesting thing to think about it the other way and see how things are set up the way they are.
Yeah, it's an
Absolutely.
outstanding point.
If you look at not only from a learning perspective, right? There's also that opportunity for us to fix, right? Some of the past wrongdoings, sort of an atonement that we see within our family. That's going to keep us real. That's going to cause a lot of risk. Not only sugarcoating, hey, you're great, you know, we love you and all that, but I mean, dude, what are you doing, right? What do you think you are? I mean, with this behavior. So folks are going to keep us real, keep us really cemented in a way that we don't go way too far. That's going to be way more difficult for us to come back and continue towards our own, you know, journey of evolution. So I do believe that, going back to Emmanuel, right? Emmanuel mentioned the purpose of our families, if I remember correctly. One is learning, one is atonement, right? And the third and the most important one is moral and spiritual advancement. And I wanted to highlight that Patricia from our Facebook here says that it's through patience, tolerance, and kindness, this practice, that's going to get us there. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, Susanna.
No, just quickly. I think also that you know, love is something that we learn. It is unrealistic to expect that you reincarnate with a spirit with whom you have had animosity throughout perhaps many incarnations, and expect from yourself that that animosity is going to turn into, you know, affinity from one lifetime. We still think in very material ways. And so I remember one time I had a person who was at the spiritual center, a young guy. He moved to Europe and he went to live with his aunt. Found out that he didn't have a lot of affinity, and he said, "What do I do?" You know, and I said, "Well, you know, perhaps you guys had a very difficult time before. So at this point, if you can live with her and no longer harm her, that would be a good beginning. If you can work on patience and on acceptance," Andre mentioned that, you know, accepting without expecting to be accepted, just to be able to respect. We don't need to love. We can love in you know, love has so many levels, right? So sometimes just respect, sometimes just trying not to be as hostile as we can possibly be. This is also love. The effort, the intention to, you know, coexist.
I love that, Susanna, because I think sometimes we have this presupposition in our minds that affinity either is or it's not.
Right.
And affinity is developed with experience. You have to spend time together, right? Yeah. You have to get to know others to be able to have that affinity with them. You cannot, it's really hard to have affinity without having commonality, right? So you have to spend that time together. And so even though we may not have that affinity with our blood relatives at the moment, spending time with them and using all these techniques and tools that we're talking about, we will get to a point where we will develop some sort of affinity. And it doesn't mean that we're going to become best friends overnight, like you said, right?
Right.
I also think that if we were to consider our life, present and past, and let's say future, and we look at it as if it's a puzzle. If it's completely, not yet put together, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if we were to take a look at it from a finished perspective, we would see that indeed we are at the very best place, presently speaking, for our spiritual growth. And since we mentioned Emmanuel so much, I'm going to mention here another book that is really great called Living Spring. It's from the Living Spring collection, in which Emmanuel states that the relationships that we have, relatives that we are given, are basically work of love that God has given us to be able to accomplish in this lifetime. So while we are basically eliminating the rough edges of our own soul, and in the work of acceptance that has been talked about here, it's really important to have that. We also understand that the type of relationships that we have been given in this lifetime is a work of art waiting to be finished. And basically, we are going to be cooperating for that to happen. So of course, it's going to be hard. Not every relationship, not every family is going to be a garden of roses. Sometimes it's going to be a thorny bush that we are going to feel scraping and hurting, and it's going to bleed a little bit, but it does heal. And we also realize in that thoughts that we also sometimes are thorns. We are not always made up of roses. So this concept and understanding of whom we also are facilitates to develop compassion also.
Yeah, and
So,
let's go back to that, but
yeah, let's keep it real, folks.
all right.
It's not easy. Everybody understands. Knowledge is not easy, right? Just look at some of the data points. Let's bring it to reality today. In the United States today, more than half of marriages end up in divorce within 5 years, right?
Mhm.
So more than 60% of marriages ended up in divorce within 20 years. What are we doing wrong?
Is it maybe the type of culture that we have where instead of breaking it, we fix it, broke it, we replace it. So it's
Change
very
the channel.
different from, I mean, basically, this is pretty much a movement that we see. I mean, there was this thing that talked about a couple that had been married for 60 years, and they asked, what is the secret for a long-lasting marriage? Well, nobody said it's going to be perfect and happy at the whole time, but at our time, when things were broken, we fixed it. We didn't replace with a new one. And this is what we see happening often, is giving up too easily. You know, why do we give up so easily when relationships are so valuable? You know, where is the concept? Where are we getting that from? And so the more we realize the importance, I think, of cell, of this family life of cell in a society, the harder we will work to make things come about. And it's inevitable. Sometimes there will be. I mean, what do you do with somebody who says, I can't stay married anymore, I have to get out of this relationship? Do you say, no, it's a sin? You know, is there such a thing in Spiritism, Daniel? Can we get divorced nowadays?
Yes, we certainly can.
Right?
I was going to piggyback on that and say, you know, to go back to Flavia too. I think that, you know, part of the challenge is part of the larger societal challenge, right? Because we made this connection early on. The family yields society. So when we look at society, we can see some of the flaws of the family. When we look at the family, we can see some of the flaws that we see in society because they're so connected, right? And I think that this piece is about communication. How often do we fail to communicate effectively in our relationships and have meaningful conversations about how we're feeling? What is it that's well? What is not working out well? So it's not surprising that sometimes we are surprised by the fact the other person wants to end the relationship and we don't even know, because we are scratching at the surface of relationships. We're not having deep conversations about what's important to me or what's hurting me or what's bothering me. We have this superficiality, this varnish of, you know, which is not really deep, of superficiality in our relationships, where we don't have conversations such as the one we're having right now, for instance, right? This is a great conversation because it allows us to really think about what's important to you, what's important to me. You know, how is it that you think about this? How is it that I think about this? And in our society today, to make that parallel again, I think we can see that we are suffering from this ability to be able to be okay with people who think differently than us, right? So all of a sudden, if we think differently, we become a little bit of become enemies, right? We assign people colors, right? You're blue, I'm red, or you're red, I'm blue. I can't talk to you, I can't hang out, right? And all these kinds of things. And so it's no surprise that if we are displaying this kind of mindset, it comes from somewhere and it comes in our family. So if you want to do something different, then we have to change those relationships one by one and have frank conversations such as the one we're having right now, which are not easy, right? But do we sit down with our families, for instance, and talk about that? We have seen the erosion of family, right? So do people even sit down with their families and talk? The life is so busy that we have all these excuses not to do it. Funny enough, well, not funny, but interesting enough, we are now in a place in our history where we are being basically put on spiritual timeout a little bit and say, you guys are all going to quiet down, simmer down, people.
Yeah, I agree.
Simmer down and stay home.
Simmer down and deal with and deal with those people around you for a little bit, right?
Time out.
We're going to nuts, but deal with it.
In this timeout, look, I want to comment because Patricia Eastwood made a very cool comment. That's very easy for us to generalize and forget that each individual is so very unique, and she's so right. I mean, I'm a universe of myself, and my husband is a completely different person also. So she says some marriages break down due to the abuse and addiction. which is also a huge topic that must be considered. So when you look at it from this point of view also, I mean, seriously, sometimes we don't even know who we are. We don't even know what we feel. We don't even know what we want to be able to communicate this with someone else. You know, and sometimes, you know, with what Patricia's saying, some people, even though they're married and they seem like they have someone beside them, they feel very lonely. They feel like they can't be themselves. There is no intimacy that has been created where both can look at each other's eyes and say, this is what I feel. This is basically what I need. You know, what do you feel? What do you need? There isn't this conversation. And it seems like because we've been put on timeout, you know, God has, as an educator, has put all of us on timeout. We are inside the house. We are inside the home. We are with our kids, teenagers, if you have it, if you don't, spouses that maybe that they haven't spoken with each other. They
utilize all ages too.
Of all ages. I mean, they utilize the everyday herdness of life, doing 1,000 things, but they're not at home spending time and talking to each other. So this is very, very important. I feel this whole thing of coronavirus has brought us to be home and be present, not only with our loved one, but with ourselves, so that we can learn about the things that is still lacking within. You know, we could make it so much better, cleaning old wounds. You know, I heard Daniel talking about, is it too late if it comes to the end of someone's life to fix things? It's never too late. And that's the beauty of reincarnation. It's never too late. And once we realize it, what can we do to make it better with other relationships as well? And this is whole learning process, really.
Yeah. And Sue, I thought you were going to jump in at 1 second in time. Are you, you want to jump in now?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Good, because I have zero thoughts. So you guys do the smart talking, I'll do the listening.
Andre Moreira is here with us, and he has he's in some of his lectures about family. He uses this metaphor that I really have integrated into my own talks when I talk about family. And so he says, and hopefully I'll be able to be, faithful to what his points. But, you know, that God is so smart that he allows us to fall in love with people in what he calls is a natural obsession process, where we become pretty much fascinated with someone else and we fall in love with people. And it's a fascination because we stop thinking, right? We are under a great illusion about who the other person is, thinking that the other person is the absolutely. So you see things like 3 months into a dating relationship, you see the person posting on Facebook that he or she have found the person of their lives that they have been waiting for in 3 months of relationship, right? So they are fascinated. There's no question about it. And so then eventually they get married, and marriage becomes the greatest disobsession process, because you actually get to know the person who you have married. And this is outstanding because right there, when you start to see that person for who he or she truly is when the greatest opportunity for learning to love arises. Because at first you think that you are in love, but love is something that you learn. And like Patricia said, right? It comes with the practice of respect. I always like to share this because, being gay, and, I married in 2000.
Oh man,
trouble.
There is now on.
It was so long ago, right? We've been together for 20 years, right? 20 years.
Wow.
Couch.
And then when marriage became legalized in the U.S., then I married again, right? And this was 13 years later, and it was an incredible experience, completely different than the first time. Because at that time, I felt like when I said, I love you and I want to be with you, it had a completely different meaning, because I have already got to know that person and have seen her flaws and her limitations, and she has seen mine, and we had still decided to be together. You know what I mean? We have decided that although we are humans, the fact that she has her limitations gives me space to be human myself. And we don't need to be perfect. So embracing each other's humanity and respecting and valuing what the other person brings to the relationship is an incredible learning. And that is a powerful thing that family offers. And then in many families, not always, but in many families, then you have the kids, and that takes, things to another level of learning, where it becomes much less about the couple and it becomes more about the four of you, the three of, how many, and attending to the kids, and they become a priority, and you have to shift. So I just think that, it is an incredible experience. It's not easy, definitely not easy. I think that, it was brought up, abusive relationships. Spiritism is very solid in terms of, the first person that you need to love is yourself. And so, taking care of yourself, attending to your needs, and that's the most important thing. I mean, we should not, place ourselves in a position to be abused by anyone. And finally, just going back to Daniel Santos, right? So I think that it is, during the time when someone is dying, it is an incredible opportunity, and it's amazing that a lot of healing can take place at this time, right? Mm-hmm. So I am dealing with this right now in my family. It's a very personal issue, a very painful one, but it's amazing, and I am absolutely embracing this moment as a moment of healing. I'm so thankful because it's just like, it's mind-boggling. Why do we have to wait until the very end of life, right?
Yeah.
To actually seek to address those issues, It's amazing. It's really amazing, because it forces you to look at things that, for so long you have chosen not to look at. But yes, Daniel, I think that so much healing can come at the end of the life.
And I want to jump in on the bandwagon there too, and say that, one of the clear things about Daniel's question, which we haven't necessarily touched on, is the fact that we did, but we could probably touch a little bit more, is the fact that if we don't fix problems this time around, we might just have to come back to deal with them again, right? It's as if we were watching just, one episode of a long series, right? Every lifetime is just one episode, and we might need a couple of episodes to get the whole relationship right. So that's why it's important to heed the advice that Susanna's talking about in making the best of the moment now, so we don't have to postpone this to the future episode that we will have to play out, because relationships have to be straightened out. And I think that family is exactly that. It's this journey that we have to do, and it's the beginning of a journey of coming out of oneself, right? We are forced to stop worrying just about us, and we have to deal with people who are next to us. There is a wonderful question in the Spirits book, I think 775 or something like that, but basically asks, what would happen if we didn't have families? And the answer is awesome, because it's awesome because of what it doesn't tell us. It says we will go back to like the magnification of selfishness.
Correct.
Right? So basically it's telling us that family is this little training wheels that we have of sorts in a little bike that tells us how to deal with the idea that we have to learn that we're not the brightest spot in the universe. And we have to kind of slowly go that route and to learn how to deal with other people, just like you guys described, right? So if we think that our family stuff, imagine in a world where there is no families whatsoever. That's even worse, right?
Much worse.
I must tell you then, because I mean, everything that everybody's talking about, coming to the realization that sometimes we could have done a lot more in a relationship than what we did. You know, I also had the same issue with my father at the end of his at the end of his life, you know, physical life, that is, and how all of that was healing and everything else. But another thing that I must point out, and I hope I don't offend anyone, it's just basically from a very personal view. I came about Spiritism, having contact with Spiritism when I was 14 years old. And everybody knows that teenage years are very troublesome, and there's a lot of opportunities for falling into the wrong crowd and doing the wrong things. And, you know, I was adopted. Some of you already know that. Others do not know that. But I was adopted twice, actually. The second time was when I was 5, and it was by my present father that I just mentioned, who discarnated in 2015. And I used to have a lot of anger in my heart in considering myself to be a victim of circumstances, you know, that my biological parents didn't love me enough, that I was abandoned, that this and that, and coming up with so many things that really was not true. And Spiritism comes and tells you that there is a subtle principle of laws that apply to every family situation. It is not by chance. Things don't just happen without rhyme or reason. There is a reason behind everything. And that was very liberating, because it also empowers you to do something about that which you don't feel is correct in your family life. Mm-hmm. Again, none of this stuff is easy. I mean, you know, I struggled with it until the day my father discarnated. And of course, you know, everybody have their own issues with their own families, but there is space for betterment and for work. And the sooner we realize that family is offering us exactly that, this laboratory where we are working out different solutions, if you will, to come up with the perfect result, the better it will equip us with faith and strength to look at our family as truly a gift in our lives, and not something that we're being punished for. It's not. The family that we have is a result of our own past. And the family that we envision for the future can be worked on right here and right now.
That's a great point.
I want to piggyback on that real quick. We all understand, we've talked, you know, enough here about the purpose of our families, right? Which is to really learn. It's a school. It's also a place that we can correct our previous wrongdoings, right? We can redress some previous mistakes, right? We can also make an impact into human progress. Not only the progress of their loved ones, they're gonna, you know, bear fruits from our family, right? But also those around us, right? But the way I see Spiritism, right? It's this toolbox that it's a practical guide for us to live our lives. And I wanted to go back to one of the questions that Fernanda here asked us on Facebook, right? Again, besides patience and tolerance, for somebody that's feeling that they're growing apart from their family, what should they do? And I think Jussara also mentioned that, you know, after this, you know, quarantine, perhaps some couples will end up getting divorced because we're not used to living so close to each other in this modern day and age. They're all rushing and all that, right? Again, these turbulent times that we're living, what are the Spiritist advice or pieces of advice that we can share with our listeners and viewers that can potentially help them make this, you know, family or journey a more effective one?
I would go back to communication.
Yeah, I would too. I was going to go right there, done. I was going to say, you know, if someone is moving away, if you have that feeling, I think your best, absolutely best approach is to sit down with that person and to say, not to point fingers, not to accuse. This is something that I try to use a lot when I am working on my own relationships. When you sit to talk to someone, you don't say you have done this or you have done that. You talk about your own experience. You talk about your own feelings. You say, listen, I feel it is my perception that we are drifting away from one another. I feel sad. I feel scared. I miss you. Or I deep inside myself, I would like for it to be different. What can we do together? You know, I'm not saying that this is the reality, but so you speak about your perception, you speak about your feelings. And I think that this with your children, with your spouse, right? because a lot of times this is something that I usually tell when I have fraternal conversations with people. I try to share with them this experience, which I actually learned from my partner from the very beginning of our relationship. She said to me, one of the most detrimental things to relationships is pointing fingers.
Yeah.
And so take responsibility for your feelings and speak about your personal experience, understanding that your personal experience is not necessarily the truth, is your perception of the reality. And listen to the other's perception of reality and try to see how can you come together to take it to the place where you would like for you to go.
Yeah, and there's a couple of tools that are not necessarily spiritist in nature, but are interesting for help us address. One of those is compassionate communication, Marshall Rosenberg, that gives us some skills to do exactly that, to have these difficult conversations with people. Because to be honest with you, if you think about it, we haven't learned that from school. And when family is hurting, we don't pick up those skills either. It's like a vicious cycle, right? So our ability to troubleshoot and fix conflict is not high these days. And I think that has a lot to do with why the world is the way it is, because we struggle of having these difficult conversations in ways that don't feel like they're aggressive, right? That they're really heartfelt and they really speak to your feeling as opposed to pointing fingers to other people. But that's a beautiful perspective there. But I would always go back to communication, right? I think that what suits you is beautiful.
I also would like to point out that I think that one big mistake that we all do, and I think it was Flavio who said in the beginning, is that when we think about family, whether we're thinking about marriage or the whole thing, marriage, kids, the dog or the cat, I have two in my backyard, Susanna's got Pickle, is the whole idea of a fairy tale relationship that doesn't take work, that doesn't have difficulties and challenges that come about. And I think that the sooner we realize that, sometimes at the Spiritist Center, we do fraternal assistance and people will say, I want to have the relationship that you have with your husband or with your wife. Hey, it looks beautiful from the outside, but nobody is living inside the home to see the kind of work that each other is doing to try to make it work. And Alberto Almeida and Andre, I think Andre also said this on one of his questions on Instagram, is it possible to make a fire, a flame, where a relationship is just a spark now? And both of them said that it is possible to make it flame again, to make it hot again, to make it come to life again. But it does take strength and effort from both sides. It's not just one. Both of them have a responsibility, and this also goes aligned with, we're only talking about marriage here, but I would also like to talk about a little bit about how kids are also coming to the planet. And I don't have a master's or a PhD because I don't have children, so it's easy to maintain a relationship different than others who do have kids added to the equation. But kids also learn from what the parents are doing. And a lot of times the idea of relationship that we have comes from what we were exposed to as a kid. And they're not always the best. So sometimes we have this idea that it is okay to be in an abusive relationship, that it is okay to be submissive and not have your own opinion or idea. So what we are exposing our kids to, whether we are parents, godparents, great parents, uncles, aunts, whatever the case may be, is also going to have an effect into the kids' minds about what family should be like.
Yeah, and I want to
let me see if I can bring this all together. Dan said that we're not trained, neither taught how to deal with our emotions. Totally agree, right? Let's go back to our parents, or maybe the previous generation, right? The way, and I've loved my parents, right? My mom is in the spiritual world already. You guys know this. I'm very blessed and fortunate to have great loving parents. But our parents if we were not taught to deal with our emotions, let alone our parents, the previous generation, right? And we all know that the example is not the best way to teach kids. It's the only one, right? So our parents, they tried their best, right? To teach us, to educate us, right? But now we have more knowledge, more access to knowledge, to wisdom and whatnot. We're trying to, so the world's evolving, right? We're moving towards a better place, right? Things like new knowledge, spiritism, new authors are coming on board. They're teaching us, right, how to be better human beings, how to really deal better with our emotions and all that. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is that we should never forget that we're spiritual beings, right? And that nothing happens by accident. As Albert Einstein used to say, right? God doesn't throw dice. Let's
Sure.
remember that we are in the best
Sure.
family,
Sure,
the
sure.
best place at the best time that we can really achieve our goals
Sure, Flavio, I agree.
and get better, right?
So I agree, and I think it's right to say that our parents didn't have that training either, right? That they had a rougher time than we did. I think it's great to do that.
Much so.
But I think at one point in time too, we have to stop looking at the cause of the problem and work at it. And I think it goes back to what we touched about before, which is self-reflection, right? Because oftentimes our initial piece is my family doesn't understand me. I have siblings who are difficult. My parents are tough. Yes to all of these things. And what is our role and what is our value add to our family, right? Because sometimes we are quick to say, my sister is a pain in the butt. My parents didn't love me enough, right? And all that stuff is true. But at the same time, we also have to turn that focus inside a little bit and say, what am I adding to this family here? Because family is tough by nature. Very few families, we are told, even from the Spirits book, are here for a full, love bind tie thing, right? A lot of it is growing pains.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yes, we can find the fault, but what are we willing to put in on that thing to make it better, right? Because we have to spend time together to work our relationships, right? There's no other way. We cannot expect to have, to leave the house and come back and be home in 1 hour and expect that relationships are going to be beautiful if we're not feeding it, watering it. We're not making a deposit in the bank of relationships. If we're just making withdrawals, we're going to go overdraft, right?
In every relationship, really, every relationship. Because we're talking, yes, of course, immediately at home, but also outside of our home. I mean, Susanna is a dear friend of mine. She's a sister, much like you guys also are.
And we're not.
Exactly. Well, you guys are. But what I'm saying is she's right here.
Hold on, let me disconnect her really quick, people. Let me disconnect her really quick. Let's get somebody else in here.
GoToMeeting has a dismiss attendee. So what we're saying is, because we also have our spiritual ties, it is also up to us to continue strengthening each other, to call each other, to say, what do you need? What can I do for you? To just say, I'm here. I am thinking about you, because while we have the challenges, relationships at home, we also have those that we have had the blessing opportunity of reincarnating beside, that we have already developed these loving ties, and we are placed in each other's lives to support and strengthen each other on the road to, acquiring this kind of healing that we are all looking for. As Emmanuel stated, it is futile to run away from any relationships that we have been placed under in the home place. It doesn't work. We're going to have to do it again. We're going to have to revisit it again. So while we are having to liquidate some type of debt from the past, we have our family ties to help us, assisting us through the course of our existence, to make things a lot easier. And I just wanted to point that out also, because I appreciate you guys so much, while I also appreciate those that are listening that have been a true source of strength in my life to try to deal with difficult things in the past. So much thankful for that.
Indeed. And we are reaching the end of our hour here. And as we normally do.
Let's continue.
Forever.
And let's ignore our families at home too and just keep going.
Till midnight. That's good. Yeah.
But I think it's a great thing. I think the one thing that we did not touch upon, I think we kind of just ran over it a little bit, was the fact that a lot of people have this belief in blood ties, right? And their physical family comes first. And I think that we kind of indirectly touched on that and saying we should expand our thought and a concept of family to realize that family may start at home, but it doesn't end there, right? And our challenge is to kind of continue to expand that circle to realize that not only those who we have affinity with, like all of us here on this call, but also those that we don't know yet. We're also going to welcome them into our family in the future, right? That's, I think, the universal family that we keep talking about, but we're not necessarily there just yet, right? When we're running away and we're stocking toilet paper, right? Or we are stocking, like gel, like hand sanitizers, right? They have failed to understand the idea that everybody else may need that too. Just gonna toss that out there, right? So we need to kind of expand that concept to those who are not yet close to us, but who will be. And that's one more last thing there, right? So Let's make sure. And by the way, people, if you hoard all the hand sanitizer, right, the people who without hand sanitizers are going to infect us, right? It makes no sense. I'm just going to put that out there, right? COVID times. But all jokes aside, this is the time when we want to have some time to do our quick wrap up and just say thank you to everybody who's listening, who's chiming in. We really so appreciate it. But we want to also just kind of do a takeaway here and see. So what do you take away? What is the one thing that you leave behind for us from this conversation about family? Flavio, can we go to you?
Sure. I think we have to always remember, right? The spiritual ties, the family that we have affinity, that we love, right? That we have that, strong bond, our connection, right? That's our true family. Yes, we do have to honor, we do have to respect, to help, and to really serve our physical family, because that's the best family that we have right now in our lifetime to achieve what we're trying to achieve. There's a difference between the two, right? Our goal is to every single person, right, across the world becomes a dear brother and sister in the future. That's our goal. We know we're not there yet, but that's the destination we all need to achieve and aspire to get to, right? So one more time, I wanted to highlight that nothing happens by accident. We are at the best place, with the best time, with the best people that can really help us get to our destination, right?
Well done, Flavio. How about you, Susana? What would you have us remember?
Well, I was just thinking while Flavio was talking, we're in a time of a major crisis, a moral crisis in our world right now. And I have been, following Instagram, a little bit of Facebook.